I brought out the work blazer for this one because today we're talking about confidence in the workplace. Okay. You know, one of the most common places that people tend to shrink back and not feel confident or come across as confident is work. The place where, honestly, the stakes are real and the pressure is on. And instead of showing up fully, a lot of people spend their entire career playing small. They stay quiet in meetings, not asking for the raise they deserve, taking credit for less than they actually did, waiting to be noticed instead of making themselves known. And I think a lot of it comes down to one thing. They don't believe that they belong at the table they're actually sitting at. That changes today. Everything we've talked about in the last few videos, and if you haven't watched the others yet, I'll link them in the description below. Confidence being trust in yourself and who God created you to be. Confidence being rooted in identity. The body language you need, the social skills, all of it applies here. The workplace is not a different world with different rules. It's just a specific arena where confidence shows up in a very particular, very high stakes way. And the reason I wanted to do this as its own video is because I think the professional context brings out some very unique challenges. There's hierarchy, right? You've got a boss and they've got a boss. There's performance reviews. There's a fear of looking incompetent in front of people that you respect or people who have power over your income, right? There's imposter syndrome, which we're going to spend some real time on today, okay? Because it is very real. There are all of these specific pressures that make it really easy to shrink, even when in other areas of your life, you feel pretty solid. So let's talk about it. First of all, I want to start with imposter syndrome because I think it's the root of a lot of workplace confidence issues. If you're not familiar with the term, imposter syndrome is basically this persistent feeling that you don't actually deserve to be where you are. Like you're not good enough to fill the role that you're in, that you just got lucky, that you've fooled the people into thinking that you're more capable than you actually are. And that at some point, someone is going to figure it all out, right? And then there's what's wild about it is it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't just affect people who are new or inexperienced. Some of the most accomplished, successful people in the world have described that feeling of being a fraud, that imposter syndrome. Doctors, executives, pastors, athletes, people who by every objective measure have earned their place. And still, they feel like they're one mistake away from being exposed as an imposter. The reason imposter syndrome is so persistent is because it's not really about your qualifications. It's about your identity. It's a belief problem, not a credentials problem. You can keep getting more degrees, more experience, more achievements, and that feeling doesn't necessarily go away because the feeling isn't responding to your resume. It's responding to what you believe about yourself at the deepest level. And until that changes, nothing else will. You know, Jeremiah 1:6-7 says, when God called Jeremiah said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. And God said, do not say I'm too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command. I love this exchange because Jeremiah is doing exactly what we do, right? Looking at his own limitations, his own insufficiency, and saying, I am not enough for this. But God basically says, I didn't ask if you felt ready. I asked you to go. The calling doesn't wait for the confidence to catch up. It doesn't. Sometimes you have to move first. So I want to look at some specific scenarios because I want this to be very practical for you, okay? The first one is speaking up in meetings, and this is a big one. You're sitting in a meeting, someone says something you either agree with or want to add to, and instead of saying something, you just sit there. You think about saying something, you almost say something, and then someone else says it and gets the credit, and you kick yourself the rest of the day for not saying it first. Sound familiar? Yeah, I've been there. And here's the thing, the longer you wait to speak in a meeting, the harder it gets. Your brain starts treating your own silence as evidence that you don't have anything worth saying. So here's a practical shift for you, okay? When you go into a meeting, make it a rule to say something, anything, in the first few minutes of being there. Now, make it apply, but ask a question, make an observation. It doesn't have to be brilliant. It just needs to break the seal of speaking, right? Because once you've spoken, speaking again is so much easier. The longer you stay quiet in a room, the louder your silence gets. And at some point, people stop wondering what you think. They just assume you don't have anything to say or anything to add. And you do, but nobody is going to pull it out of you. At some point, you have to decide that your perspective is worth being heard, right? Number 2 is asking for what you deserve, okay? Whether it's a raise, a promotion, a better assignment, a lot of people are dramatically underpaid and undervalued not because their employer doesn't value them, but because they've never asked. Yeah, they assume that good works speaks for itself. And sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times the person who gets the raise is not the hardest worker. It's the one who made their contributions visible and then had the confidence to ask. The Bible says you have not because you ask not. And that's stewardship, by the way, not greed, okay? Using the gifts and work ethic that God gave you and being willing to advocate for fair compensation, it's not selfish. That's responsible. The next one is to handle mistakes publicly. Everyone makes mistakes at work. The difference is how you handle it. How you handle it is everything, okay? Confident people own mistakes quickly, cleanly, and without spiraling, okay? They said, here's what's happened. Here's what I'm going to do about it. And here's how I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And then they move on. They don't grovel. They don't disappear. They don't spend the next week over explaining themselves. They own it and they move forward. And that actually builds trust. Watching someone handle failure with grace is one of the most confidence-inspiring things that you can witness, right? Have you ever seen someone do that? It's inspiring. Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for human masters. That verse reframes the whole thing. When your work is entirely an act of worship, when you're doing it as unto God and not to impress a boss or earn a title, it takes a lot of performance anxiety out of it. You're not trying to manage everyone's perception of you. You're just trying to be faithful with what's in front of you. And there is a quiet, steady confidence that comes from that. Now, I want to go just a little bit deeper on this, okay? Because I think there's something underneath a lot of workplace anxiety that doesn't really get named enough. A lot of us have tied our sense of worth to our professional performance, our title, our salary, whether our boss approves of us, how our last project landed. And when work is going well, we feel good about ourselves. And when it's not, when we get passed over or the project failed or we got some sort of critical feedback, we don't just feel like we did something wrong. We feel like we are something wrong. And here's the danger of making your career your identity. Your career will fail you. At some point, at some season, there will be things where things don't go as planned. A layoff, a missed promotion, a business that didn't work out or didn't make it. And if your identity is wrapped up in your professional success, that season doesn't just hurt your career, it wrecks you as a person. But if your identity is rooted in something that doesn't depend on your performance, you can take a hit and you can keep going. That's resilience. And that is the difference between people who bounce back and people who don't. Psalm 62:5-6 says, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken." I will not be shaken. Not, I will not have hard seasons. Not, things will go, not, things will always go well, right? But I will not be shaken because my foundation is not on my job. It's not in my title or my income or my professional reputation, but it's in him. And that does not change when the quarterly review does, right? Confidence at work is not about never feeling like an imposter. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room or the most politically savvy or the best at self-promotion. It's about showing up fully with what you have, doing the work as unto God, advocating for yourself without apology, and handling both the wins and the failures without letting either one of those define you. Speak up in the meeting, ask for what you deserve, own your mistakes, and stop tying your worth to the outcomes you can't fully control. You were not put in your career to play it small. You weren't. Whatever it is that you do, you were given specific gifts, a specific work ethic, a specific set of experience that no one else has. And playing small with those things isn't humility, it's a waste. So show up fully, like it matters, because it truly does. And hey, if this series of confidence has been adding value, subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and drop a comment. Where does confidence break down for you most professionally? Is it in speaking up? Is it the imposter syndrome that you feel the most? Or maybe it's asking for more, asking for the raise. I want to know. Let me know in the comments. And remember, you are worthy, you are loved, and you are chosen. I hope you have a blessed week.